How does a sickly boy from a coal-dusted town in Wales grow up to become one of the most powerful, electrifying, and unstoppable voices in music history? This is not just the story of Tom Jones the celebrity. This is the story of Tom Jones the fighter. A man who battled death as a child, fame as a young man, heartbreak as a husband, and irrelevance as a performer, and still found a way to rise again and again. This is the life of a voice that refused to be silenced. Pontypridd, South Wales, a small town with big hills, hard work, and coal in the air. This was the world Tom Jones was born into on June 7, 1940, as Thomas John Woodward. His father was a coal miner, working in one of the most dangerous jobs in post-war Britain. There were no silver spoons, no record deals, no TV dreams, just blackened hands, smoky skies, and a tight-knit community that survived on grit and tradition. Young Tom wasn't a typical child. He was shy, withdrawn, obsessed with music. He would sing in the streets, in school, in church, anywhere someone might listen. But at age 12, his life changed in an instant. He was diagnosed with tuberculosis, a disease that at the time could mean a slow and agonizing death. Doctors told his parents he might not survive. For nearly 2 years, he was isolated at home, confined to bed, struggling to breathe. But here's where fate did something strange. While other kids were outside playing, Tom was lying in bed, listening to music on the radio for hours, sometimes days at a time. American soul, gospel, blues, rock and roll, Mahalia Jackson, Elvis Presley, Little Richard. These voices became his lifeline. And in that small, dimly lit bedroom, Tom began to sing. Not to impress, not to perform, but to heal. His body may have been weak, but his voice was getting stronger every day. Long before the world would scream his name under the stage lights of Las Vegas, Tom Jones was a 16-year-old boy standing face to face with the kind of responsibility most men twice his age would run from. When Linda Trenchard, his childhood sweetheart, became pregnant, he didn't hesitate. He married her. Not out of scandal or shame, but out of duty, out of love. And maybe even then, out of something deeper. A belief that he could protect what mattered, even if he had nothing. Their son Mark was born in 1957. At that time, Tom was no superstar. He was a laborer. He dug ditches, worked in factories, and sold vacuum cleaners door to door. His world wasn't studios or stages. It was soot, sweat, and scraping together enough to put food on the table. But at night, when Mark was asleep and Linda was worn out from another day of making do, Tom would head to the pubs and clubs of South Wales. There, he'd sing. Not for fame, not even for money, but because he had to. Because that voice needed to be let out, and music was the only place he felt like himself. Yet love and talent don't always walk the same path. Linda and Tom loved each other, but their lives began splitting into two very different orbits. Linda was grounded, private, and fiercely loyal to her working-class roots. Tom, on the other hand, was already being pulled toward a bigger world, one filled with bright lights, temptation, and eventually a level of fame that could bend even the strongest foundations. Still, for years, they stuck together. Through the lean days, through the unpaid gigs, through the moments where every door seemed to close before it opened. Tom has often said that without Linda's support during those early years, when he was just a dreamer with a voice and no prospects, he would have never made it. She didn't just believe in his talent, she shouldered it. But even as his star began to rise, the weight of that early responsibility never left him. He was a husband, a father, a provider. And for all the silk shirts and stardom that came later, there was a part of Tom Jones that never stopped being Tommy Woodward. The teenage boy who married young, worked hard, and sang like his life depended on it. In 1963, a stroke of luck arrived in the form of Gordon Mills, a music manager who saw something undeniable in Tom's performances. Mills offered to represent him and suggested a stage name, Tom Jones, to give him a more international and memorable brand. It wasn't just a name change, it was a transformation. Then came the song that changed everything. It's Not Unusual. Released in 1965, it wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. The track skyrocketed to #1 in the UK and soon after, the United States. For a young singer from Wales, breaking into America was like winning the lottery twice. Suddenly, Tom was everywhere. The Ed Sullivan Show, Top of the Pops, sold-out tours, screaming fans. Elvis was a fan. Frank Sinatra invited him to dinner. He had made it. More hits followed. Delilah, What's New Pussycat, Green Grass of Home. Each one cemented his status as a vocal powerhouse. Unlike the Beatles or the Stones, who relied on instruments and bands, Tom was the instrument. His voice was the spectacle. And with that voice came opportunity. By the early 1970s, Tom Jones wasn't just a pop star. He was an entertainer. Big voice, big stage presence, big energy. Naturally, Las Vegas came calling. Night after night, he lit up the Vegas Strip. Tight leather pants, unbuttoned shirts, gold chains. Women literally threw their underwear on stage. His shows were electric and his charisma was unmatched. But behind the scenes, the fame was getting complicated. He was now a global sex symbol. Rumors of affairs weren't rumors. They were true. Tom later admitted to sleeping with hundreds of women while on tour, even while married. Some even claimed he had affairs with fellow celebrities. Linda stayed silent. She stayed home in Wales, away from the lights, the fans, and the press. Their marriage became a complicated coexistence. Loyalty from a distance, love from afar. But Tom, for all his flaws, always spoke of Linda with reverence. He described her as the only person who ever truly knew him, not as Tom Jones, but as Tommy from Pontypridd. Everything in entertainment has a shelf life, and by 1975, Tom Jones was starting to see his. That year, a performance in Las Vegas bombed. The energy wasn't there, the crowd was cold, and for the first time in his career, Tom walked off stage humiliated. He canceled his shows. 6 months of silence followed. No new music, no live gigs, just questions. Was he past his prime? Had the industry moved on? This was the lowest point in his career. For many performers, this kind of failure is the final chapter. But Tom Jones wasn't done. He just needed a new story. Just when Tom's career seemed to be fading, an unexpected figure stepped in, his son, Mark Woodward. Now an adult, Mark had an idea. He believed his father didn't need to chase pop trends. He needed to own who he was. Strip away the Vegas glitter. Return to the music. Rediscover the soul. Mark became his father's manager and completely reshaped his career. No more tuxedos. No more gimmicks. Tom Jones would now be a soulful, authentic artist. One who could collaborate with contemporary musicians, embrace modern sounds, and show a new generation why his voice mattered. In 1999, Reload was released. And just like that, Tom Jones was back on top. The album featured duets with the Cardigans, Stereophonics, Natalie Imbruglia, and more. The sound was edgy, modern, and fresh. His cover of Mama Told Me Not to Come and the instantly iconic Sex Bomb became club hits. It was his biggest selling album ever. Critics who once wrote him off were now praising his vocal versatility. Younger audiences who had never heard Delilah were now streaming his new hits. He was invited to perform at Glastonbury, and he crushed it. Tom Jones wasn't a relic, he was relevant. Again. In 2016, after nearly 60 years of marriage, Tom suffered the greatest personal loss of his life. Linda passed away after a long battle with cancer. He was devastated. For a time, he didn't know if he could continue. He questioned everything: his purpose, his future, his voice. But gradually, he found healing through music. In 2021, he released Surrounded by Time, an introspective album filled with covers of deeply emotional songs. One track, I Won't Crumble With You If You Fall, felt like a direct message to Linda. It was raw, vulnerable, honest. And it reminded fans that beneath the showbiz legend was a man who had loved, lost, and lived. Today, Tom Jones is in his 80s and somehow impossibly still singing like a man half his age. He's a coach on The Voice UK, mentoring young artists and sharing stories that span 6 decades of music. He still tours, still records, and still surprises audiences with that powerful, unmistakable voice. Because Tom Jones was never just about the hits, he was about survival, reinvention, passion. He turned childhood illness into inner strength, turned personal failures into growth, and turned a voice born in a coal town into one of the most recognizable sounds in the world. So the next time you hear It's Not Unusual, take a second. Listen closer. You're not just hearing a song, you're hearing the story of a man who refused to be forgotten. If you loved this deep dive into Tom Jones's incredible journey, don't forget to like this video. Subscribe for more untold stories from music history, and hit the bell so you never miss a future legend. And check the description for more stories, exclusive content, and more artist spotlights just like this one. Thanks for watching, and remember, legend never goes out of style.